I think this is meant to be unreadable. It's meant to be complicated because I think it actually reflects the nature of the problem, the question that we've got in front of us. I think this, as was mentioned earlier in a slightly different way, this is a bit of a wicked problem. This is a problem we have incomplete information on. The environment, the requirements of the idea of higher education in society is changing very rapidly, what we expect of universities. And therefore, I think it's a wicked problem. We don't even really know quite how to start understanding it, say nothing about predicting where it's going to go. So it's deliberately put up there. But I think we can identify some of the influences and some of the factors that are affecting where higher education will go and its role within society. And rather than predicting 2030, I think it would be more useful for us to look at those forces, those influences and so on, and try to understand their interrelationships so that we can start to understand where higher education might be in 2030. So I'm going to just suggest or select two of these areas, two of these factors, and just talk about them for a second. So first of them is the idea of human-software symbiosis. And I'm going to take a look at both of these from the point of view of postgraduate research rather than undergraduate study, which is where we tend to often think about higher education. And of course, postgraduate research is a different educational process than undergraduate research or undergraduate study is. So if we look at human-software symbiosis, I think one of the issues here, one of the factors influencing is, what's the university's capacity to research in this area? What influences are universities versus corporations going to be in doing the basic research and the applied research that will help us understand the relationship between humans and software and where we go? Second, I think another factor influencing this is augmented learning, the idea that we will be supported in our learning by online services, expert services, AI, and so on. Again, I can understand a little bit that operating in the undergraduate environment. I find it much more difficult to conceptualize that operating in the postgraduate environment. Certainly the way we run postgraduate degrees nowadays, certainly research degrees. So I'm just wondering what does that mean in terms of that area of higher education. The second one I'd like to talk about is social structured work, and this brings us back to several points made in the previous question about the relationship between learning and work and how they're getting closer and almost inseparable in terms of our life and the lifelong learning. And can I just add a little quip here that as someone who's just retired, I'm actually quite scared of the concept of lifelong learning. I thought I was finished, both work and learning, so I'm actually looking forward to doing neither of them for the next 20 years. So I'm a bit concerned to find that may not be the case. I've been led down the garden path, I think. So social structure work, three of the ideas that I think influence this are things like the concept of micro-contributions, that by getting many, many millions of contributions on a particular issue, we make a greater whole. I'm probably skeptical of that. I'm not sure that's necessarily the best way to advance something or understand the greater whole just because there are lots of people putting in ideas. They may be very poor ideas. Now, that may be a naive position, but I think we've got to be a little bit skeptical about that as a major way forward. The idea of hive mind, this is the expertise is defined by instantaneous access to the wisdom of crowds, that somehow the group will have the more wise view than the individual. Again, I'm quite skeptical of that as a way forward upon which we might base particularly things like postgraduate research. Thank you. And the third one would be task routing or routing, depending which part of the world you come from. That task can be deconstructed, rooted out or routed out to individuals based on their skills, their feedback, and their performance reputation. And that out of that we can get work done. I think that works in some way, some areas of industry and so on. Is it a model for higher education, and particularly postgraduate? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe we already do that to some extent when you have an expert professor who gets in PhD students working on different parts of a common problem. So maybe we already do that. I'll finish with two cautionary notes. First of all, is I think we need to be very careful in thinking about higher education and society. Careful not to use short-term changes and innovations and suggest that's going to be the way of the future. I think that's a very naive way to think. And I will pick a little bit on MOOCs here and say, we heard when MOOCs came out, it was the death of universities. I think they've been incredibly valuable in many ways, but they haven't been the death of universities, at least not yet. And second is, I think we have to be a bit careful in this room in particular, not to use the North American experience to actually project on the rest of the world. In terms of inequality, the rest of the world is much more inequitable than the North American experience. And I'll finish there.